Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
I am pleased to welcome you to today's program, and as always we try to have a topic that's of interest to you and important, and I certainly think today's topic fits that criteria. Our subject is financial investment in real estate. As so many of you know, that it's been challenging recently about the stock market and different investments, and a lot of people are turning to real estate as an investment, moving out from stocks and other types of investment. I'm very pleased to welcome to the program today Marshall Min, who since 1980 has been a real estate agent or broker in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and he's been very successful over the past 22 years. And he also now is teaching a special interest course at North Idaho College dealing with investing in real estate. Marshall, welcome to the program. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I know it's a subject our viewers will be most interested in.
Well, Tony, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's just get right into your expertise in this subject. Let's first talk a little bit about the course that you're teaching, because that will lead us into some specifics about decisions the individual makes about their financial future investment. What's the basic content of this course, or what do you say to the people who engage in this course about the future of real estate and what they might do in that field?
The name of the course is Who Wants to Be a Millionaire Without Regis? Instead of Regis, Tony, you got me. It's about investing in single-family homes. We also talk about duplexes and multifamily properties, a little bit about commercial, but mostly about single-family homes. And right now in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, the opportunities here for investing in single-family homes are better than they've ever been.
What is that reason for that?
Interest rates are low.
Okay.
The price of our homes are low, and rental rates are not extremely high, but they all three of those make sense. And basically, what you buy, you can buy single-family homes in this area today, and the tenants will pay them off for you in about 10 to 15 years. This is better than the stock market. When the stock market is great, this is better, because when you buy stocks in the stock market, you have to pay for them. You have to put your money on the table. And then you have to hope that the stock is going to go up and not down, because if it goes down, you lose money. If it goes up, you make money. And if it doesn't do either, you don't make anything, and your money just sits there. With houses, you don't have to put a lot of money in there. You can put a modest down payment. You can buy a $100,000 house, for instance, for, say, $10,000 down. In fact, there are ways you can buy them for nothing down, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But let's say you put $10,000 down or $20,000 down on a house, and the tenant pays it off for you. 10 to 15 years, your house is going to be paid off completely.
Now let me just talk about that for a moment. You know what your monthly payments are going to be for the mortgage, the interest rate and all that, and so you can calculate that out, and you would charge rent that would cover all of that, but wouldn't it be a little additional rent, because during that time period there'll be some repairs and things for the home?
Well, one of the things we talk about is buying newer homes rather than older homes.
Okay.
And when you buy newer homes, you're not going to have too many repairs and too much maintenance. There's going to be a little bit, but not very much. By the time you're going to hit your big repairs and your big maintenance items, your house is going to be paid for. And that's what, makes it such a attractive situation. Plus, you have enough money in there. Your rent will cover your payment. It'll cover your taxes, your insurance, your property management company, and your maintenance and repairs.
Okay. Suppose someone has their own home, and they may be paid off. So you're suggesting to them that they have more property. It may be more than one rental home. It may be duplexes or whatever. It depends on how much they've wished to get involved in this process, or probably maybe assets they would have to spread out. Let me put it this way. If you have one or two rentals and you're doing well, then that may lead in 3 or 4 years to us buying additional, or you can continue to add to this if that is your way of investing.
I'd buy as many as you can now, because now is the time to buy them, because prices are low Interest rates are at a low time for the last 40, they're the lowest they've been in the last 40 years.
And inflation's not a problem right now.
Inflation's good with real estate. Inflation is...
I mean, there's not inflation in other aspects of your life that you would need to divert money away at this point, like for your own living and so forth. It's, you know,
real estate protects you against inflation.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, inflation is good when you own a house and you just put a little bit of money down on it. If you put $10,000 down and inflation comes along, doubles the price of your house, you only put $10,000 in there and your house has doubled from $100,000 to $200,000. I mean, that's a good situation. That's where people made a lot of money in real estate over the last 20, 30 years.
I noticed in your course that you have a questionnaire to fill out. Would you go over some of those things that an individual needs to decide? And of course, I would assume that if one is interested in investing, you're going to go to your accountant or your attorney or a real estate agent. But what are some of the points that you ask individuals if they're interested in going this route, about how much money they've got to invest, et cetera? I know you had a sheet there with a lot of questions on it.
Well, there's a few sheets with questions to ask. This would be like an investor profile that we have.
Right.
Is basically how much do you want to invest? What's your federal income tax rate? Where are you currently invested? How much is available now? How much are you earning? Are you aware that the earnest money will be required to make an offer? And what is your reason for investing? What amount do you want to invest? What do you expect to get out of the investment?
And I would
what are you
imagine,
looking
based
for?
on your age, how long can you be involved in this process before you might need your assets by selling?
Correct. For instance, for young people just starting out, young family, I would say, and they don't usually have a lot of money, but they can buy a house, and they usually can get into a house with no money down, and they buy a house, they live in it for a little bit, buy another house, live in it for a little bit, buy another house, live in it for a little bit, and never sell them. One house will take care of college for 2 kids, and you could send them first to NIC, of course, and then to Harvard. Because after NIC, they're ready for Harvard.
You really know how to promote our institution. A minute ago, you had also indicated that, as you did just now, that oftentimes people are required to put down a certain percentage on the price of the home, but you indicate sometimes they don't. When is that usually required and when isn't it? About, say, on a $100,000 home, you put down 10 or 15,000. In other cases, you would not put that down.
Well,
what's the criteria that determines that?
Well, for somebody starting out and moving into the house, they have some programs right now where they can get in for absolutely no money down. No money down. It's cheaper to get into your own home to buy than it is to get into a rental. Because when you go into rent a house, you got to have your first month's rent up front, and you have to have your security deposit, and sometimes your last month's rent.
Yes.
When you buy a house, you have no first month's rent because your first payment isn't due until you're in the house for 30 days, and then it's due. So you don't have to pay any rent up front, and they have nothing down programs. You can even get the closing costs paid for, where people can get into a house for no money. So the first 30 to 45 days, they've got absolutely no payment, and then their first payment is due.
I'm a little confused. If someone is, a mortgage company, of course, is covering the price of the home, or the bank, the financial institutions, what criteria do they use when, in some cases, they do require a certain amount down for their own protection, and other times they don't? You can't always get into a residence for no down payments at all, right?
Well, wrong. But there's always a way that you can, and it depends on what your situation. And when we say no money down, sometimes it's no money down, but yet the person that's selling you the house is getting some money down. Sometimes you might have some equity in another property, and we're going to use a note against another property to get into there. But with first-time buyers, it is really no money down, no nothing. I mean, you could be a first-time buyer going to buy a house, and you're going to move into it. You don't even have to be a first-time buyer. You could be a second or third-time buyer. If you go in with an FHA loan, they have some programs out there.
But everyone doesn't qualify for those kind of...
Everybody qualifies for FHA. If you're breathing, you have to have good credit. You don't have good credit. One of the criteria on getting money from a bank is you have to have good credit. Okay, you have to have good credit. You have to have the ability to pay the loan. So
Well, if you get an FHA loan for your own home you're going to live in, but then if you're almost immediately going to buy an investment home and all, don't you?
No, then you don't get another
Then you don't
FHA.
get that.
No,
right.
no, you can only get.
And then that's where you may have to have a down payment of several thousand.
Well, you can use the equity in your first house to get into your second house.
If you have equity.
Okay, and usually you would have some equity built into there because by the time you get into a house, with the way the market is right now, you're probably going to have some equity. Now, you're not going to buy it the next week, okay? But 6 months to a year down the road, the way the market is right now, you'll probably have some equity in that house, and you can get into another house.
What is the difference for investors between buying a residential home for investment versus a duplex or a fourplex or a small apartment complex? I would assume, depending on the historical background of that particular person or couple, that may dictate which one of these types of investments you'd want.
The single-family homes, the reason I like them, they're easy to buy, they're easy to sell, they're easy to finance. Duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes are easy to buy, easy to finance, but they're not easy to sell, okay? So you lost one of the benefits on that. When you get into over 4 units are easy to buy, but hard to sell, hard to finance, expensive to finance. So
and there's more upkeep because you're renting a lot of units, and there's possibility
Right.
of more damage.
Well, yeah, but it's just numbers. If you wanted 10 units, you'd be better off getting 2 fourplexes and a duplex, or 3 triplexes, and or 2 triplexes and 2 duplexes, and breaking down your 10 units that way, because you'd have a better investment. They'd be easier to sell, they'd be easier to finance, they'd be easier to take care of, and you'd get better tenants in them.
You'd indicate that for first-time investors, particularly a new home, is better because there's not a lot of repairs to be expected. Right. But what if someone has, I know of a couple did this, they would buy a home, and it was a nice but older home, and they both were extremely talented, the man and wife, and they would redo the house themselves and then sell it for a good profit. So if someone is gifted at carpentry and remodeling and design, then in that case, older homes would be okay?
Definitely a good way to make money, and you could be profitable. Let's say you bought a house, and let's say you fixed it up, and you turned around and you sold it, and after all your expenses were paid, let's say you made $25,000. That would be a really good profit in this area, and I'm basing that on buying a house that's in the, say, $70,000 to $125,000 range that they're buying, and then they're fixing it up, turning around and selling it for a profit. They made $25,000. First thing happens is they have to pay their taxes. The taxes on their profit on that, if they didn't keep it long term, they're going to look at paying about 1/3 in taxes on there.
Let me interrupt again. Under federal tax laws a couple of years ago, isn't it true that if you buy a home and you live in it for 2 years, then you don't have the capital gain tax up to what is a rather large sum?
Absolutely right. That is one of the best things going right now.
So every 2 years you could do this?
If you lived in a house like that every 2 years, I would recommend to people, there are certain areas where you could buy a lot and turn around and build a house on that lot and make a sizable profit. Live in it for 2 years. If there's appreciation, you'll make a bigger profit. If you're handy and you're going to do some of the work, you're going to make even more profit, and all that money is tax-free. If you live in that house,
how long?
Oh yeah, it's only up to $500,000 per couple.
Yeah, but you're probably going to make more than $500,000 on a house.
No,
so
not in this area.
It's a good way of for people who are talented it's a way of investing and being able to move.
But there are lots of areas, well, I shouldn't say there are lots, but there are some areas where they do make more than $500,000. That's why they put the cap on there.
Right, because there is a cap.
Yeah, it's $500,000 per couple. It's $250,000 per individual that they can make if you live in it for 2 years. But usually when somebody fixes up a house, they don't usually move into it. It's really hard, because I thought when they passed that law, I was calling everybody I knew, all the builders I knew. I was even talking to my wife, we should build a house, live in it for a couple of years and do that. And usually one of the persons in the couple would like to do that, but the other one is going to say, no way, I'm not doing that, I'm not living like that.
I shouldn't get too personal, but you have a wonderful wife, and you've done that one or two occasions, and I think she has said, I don't want to keep doing this.
Right.
Yeah. So it has to be both.
Will you do me a
partners.
favor and call my wife and tell her what a wonderful husband she has, though, because sometimes she forgets.
So all of that is interesting. Now I want to play the devil's advocate for a few minutes. I was listening to a program, national program, and it was economic advisors and consultants, and they were talking about the dot-coms, and they were talking about what happened in the stock market, and then they were talking about real estate, and this was their theory that you might want to respond to. They were somewhat cautious. They said, when dot-coms are doing so well, everybody went into it, and everybody invested. It's like everybody's going to get rich, and of course there was the glut of the market, and we know what happened in that. And so they were cautioning some, saying now that people are so concerned about the stock market and what's happened, and so they're taking their funds and many are rushing out and going into real estate. And they thought the same thing might happen in real estate, that so many people would do that it too would not be as good an investment as first anticipated when it gets an overflow of people going into the same area for their financial investment.
Well, our prices here are so low compared to some of the other areas.
Okay.
A house here that you could buy for $125,000, you can go down to San Diego and pay $500,000 or $600,000 for that same house in that same kind of an area. You could go to Aspen, Colorado, and instead of paying $500,000, you could pay $1 million for that same house. So there are areas, a lot of areas, that are more expensive than we are. There are a few areas that are less expensive, but they're very few on the ones that are less expensive. Real estate, what makes real estate so attractive, especially single-family homes, because single-family homes, everybody is a home buyer. I mean, they're easy to sell, they're easy to liquidate, and my philosophy is you buy real estate, never sell it. I had a client who bought a house from one of the local builders, and his building superintendent was showing us through this new house that we bought for his investment. And we were talking to him, and he used to work for Donald Trump, and he worked for a couple of other heavy hitters. And he was telling us, he says, I asked these guys, what's the biggest mistake you have ever made in your business life? And they told him different things, but they all told him one answer that was the same. The biggest mistake, one of the biggest mistakes that they all made, was selling the real estate that they owned. Now, I like it when people sell real estate because that's my job, is selling real estate for them. But keeping real estate is a real good idea, never selling it. You'll make more money by keeping it than you will by selling it. And that's what we're talking about in investing in single-family homes. We're talking about keeping them long-term. Because if you keep them short-term, you could lose money short-term. Long-term, you can't lose money. Because if you buy a house and the tenants pay it off for you in 10 or 15 years, and you put $10,000 down on the house and it costs $100,000, and most likely that $100,000 house 10 to 15 years from now is going to be worth $200,000 to $300,000. But let's say that didn't happen. Let's take a look and say that it didn't go up at all. It's only worth $100,000 that you paid for it. Let's say that it even went down $20,000. You lost 20%. The chances of that happening are slim and none. But let's say that that's what happened. Now you paid $100,000 for the house. It's only worth $80,000. Now you own it free and clear. All you paid was $10,000. The tenants paid the other $90,000 that went into that house, and now it's worth $80,000. So you still made $70,000. Even losing money, you made $70,000 on the house.
But the fact that you had renters to pay for it. Let me, and this is not probably appropriate for this because you're talking about investing, but if one just has their own home and they're not either willing or wanting to get involved with other residents, but they bought a really nice house with the idea of investment for their retirement, and say they buy a home that's worth, let's say, $200,000, and they've stayed in it for many years, and during that period of time they've paid, property taxes
right,
and maybe some other things they have to do, and then they happen to be in a depressed area that I'm not even talking about any particular place, but that there are times when property values go down.
Absolutely.
And so after 15 years or something, instead of selling the house for $200,000, and they have to, their health and so forth, and it's dropped from $200,000 to $160,000, $170,000, they still got that cash, if it's paid for, to help them with their retirement. But they have lost, not only have they lost in the value of the house, but they've paid taxes all that time. And so it certainly
But they lived in it too.
But
they got the
and they didn't
benefits
pay
of
rent.
living in there. Yeah.
If they weren't there, they'd be paying rent.
They were paying rent to themselves. They were the property owner. They were paying rent to themselves.
So even
they
those
were
worst
living,
scenarios, you're still saying they're better off.
They were living in the house. We're not talking about your own personal residence, though, with this class. We're talking about investing in homes that you don't live in. And the nice thing about these is all the tax benefits you get. Because if you don't sell your houses, you don't have to pay taxes on the profit. And when you die, it goes to your estate at what the current value is at that time. Now, there may be inheritance tax that you might have to pay, but no income tax. And the only thing you pay income tax is on the income that's generated from the houses that you're getting. You'll pay income tax on that. But a person could buy 5 houses for $100,000. 10 to 15 years from now, they're paid off. They're worth $200,000 to $300,000. That means that person is worth between $1 and $2 million. But better than being worth $1 or $2 million is each one of those houses, after taxes, after insurance, after the property management company is paid, after repairs and maintenance is paid, there's $1,000 a month coming in from each house. 5 houses is $5,000 a month. That's a nice, tidy income coming in. And then a person can go out and do whatever they want to do because they want to do it. They could even be a teacher.
Make more than the educators
But
did.
no, they could go be a missionary if they wanted to do missionary work. They could become a realtor. They could become whatever they wanted to be and do whatever they wanted to do. If they wanted to go out and play golf, they could play golf all day. But it gives you financial freedom, and that's what we're talking about with this class is financial freedom.
Now, some individuals that invest in 2 or 3 properties in addition to their residence, again, are so gifted at even doing plumbing or different things. So in some of those cases, if their property's in the same town, they will manage themselves, and in that case, they save the money that would go to a management company. Well, that's another option.
Yeah. I would never manage my own property.
You would not.
No. It's the worst job in the world, Tony, is managing property. I do not. I tried it when I first started. I thought it would be great, especially being in the real estate business. I thought managing property would be an asset. And it was not an asset. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of aggravation. You get personally involved with your own tenants. I did it recently on one house that I owned. I did a lease purchase with some people, and we kind of got friendly, and I made some mistakes. I kicked myself in the butt because those are the mistakes. I always tell people, don't do this. And, sometimes we make those mistakes. So I've made a lot of them. Always let the property management company manage the property for you. The property management company pays for themselves. They'll get more rent than you do because when you have a tenant in the house, and they're such a nice person, and you don't want to raise the rents, and the rents are going to be going up, and that's how you're going to pay that house off in 10 to 15 years. It's because the rents continue to go up. You take all that money that comes in and you put it on the payment, and you're paying off the principal, not just the interest. That's how they get paid off. But if you say, oh, they're such a nice person, I don't want to raise their rents, and you keep the rents low, you move them into the house at, let's say, $600 a month, and 5 years later, the rent should be $1,100 a month, and they're still paying $600 a month. You're losing $6,000 a year over a 5-year period of time. You lost $30,000. I mean, that house would have been paid off with that $30,000. So
the management company
that's where the management company.
They know how to.
It's a
what
business.
the market is.
That's right, and it's a business, and they run it as a business.
In relation to this whole process, too, when you're dealing with this whole investment question, how about those contracts? And I've heard of these, and I would assume that you probably would caution people about it, but they will get a mortgage with an interest rate. I don't know what the term is, but it's a flexible one that it can go up or down depending on the market.
Adjustable rate mortgage.
Adjustable. Is that an unwise thing to do when right now, particularly when rates are so low, you can lock in at a low rate?
It's better to lock in a low rate, but if you have a property that you're only going to keep for 1 or 2 or 3 years, going for that adjustable rate mortgage is not a bad idea. But if you know you're going to keep it long term, or you're not sure if you're going to keep it long term, then you want to go for a fixed rate. In today's marketplace, you're crazy not to go fixed.
Because it's not going to get any lower than this, I would imagine.
If it does, it can only get a little bit lower.
Yeah.
It could get a whole lot higher, though.
So if you lock in this, you're going to be in great shape. But if you go the other route, then at some point down the road, those rates are going to go up significantly.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, more likely to go up than go down.
Yes, right. What other tips do you have for future investors, particularly in the class that you have, that we haven't covered that you think would be helpful?
I think it's important for an investor to have a realtor. Being that I am a realtor, of course, I would say that. But I might not be the realtor of choice for that person, but they should interview the realtor, and there may be people in different areas looking at this too. They should interview the realtor, and there are certain questions that you want to ask the realtor when you interview them that are real important. And this is the questions when you're looking for a realtor to hire, and this realtor, first of all, you want him to represent you as a client.
Right.
That means he has to look out for your best interest. He has to treat you the same way that he's treated his mother, his father, his sister, his brother, or himself. He has to put his interest or her interest ahead of his own or her own. So you always want to be a client. In the state of Idaho, you have to have a written agreement to be a client, and it ties you up for a period of time. You want to make sure you have a clause in there that will let you cancel the agreement, because if you can't cancel that agreement and you get a person that you're not happy with, you're tied up for a certain period of time. So you want to make sure you have that. We put that into our agreement. But some of the questions that you should ask.
You have about 30 seconds.
30 seconds? Well, one of the most important questions is, how many properties do you personally own? Okay, if you're going to be dealing with somebody that doesn't own any investment property himself or herself, and they're trying to sell you investment property, this is not the kind of person. You want somebody who knows about investment property, knows the ups, the downs, he knows the benefits and the liabilities.
On that note, we have to bring the permanent conclusion. It's been most informative, and I know you've helped viewers who are looking at this possibility of investment. Marshall Min, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest has been Marshall Min, and we've been talking about financial investment in real estate and how that might be helpful to some investors. You have different choices in life if you have the wish and desire and opportunity to invest. And this is one option. There are others, and we thought you might be interested, particularly as things have been developing in recent months and years. I invite you to be with us again next week at the same time, and we will discuss yet another subject. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.